Hi, Pastor Steve here. I want to thank you for listening today, and I want to encourage you because I know that God will truly bless you as you study His Word. So hey, let's get started. Amen. What a powerful time of worship. Before they get very far, let's show our appreciation for our praise team leading us in worship today. Amen. Once again, good morning to you, church. What a great privilege it is just to be in God's house with God's people together, thinking about and celebrating His mercies that are brand new every single morning. Amen? Amen. Listen, I don't know about you, but I'm still celebrating the fact that we even made it to 2023. But in addition to all of the challenges and difficulties that we experienced in 2022, as a church, we experience far more victories and opportunities and tremendous breakthroughs. So together, we're moving forward with this great sense of faith and hope and love because we serve the same God, the God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen? Amen. If you're visiting with us today or even checking us out for the very first time, not only do we want to welcome you here, but we want to invite you to make this your church home. This really is a place where you can belong and use your talents to glorify God. One of the easiest ways for you to connect can be found inside your bulletin there. Hopefully you grabbed one of these on your way in. This is your weekly connection to so many of the things that are going on here at the church. But I want to direct your attention to that little tear-off connections card there on the side. Please, please, please take a little bit of information. Take a little bit of time, fill out a little bit of information. Let us know that you were here, how we can be an encouragement to you this week, and even be lifting you in prayer. And then for your convenience, you just simply tear it off and leave it back there in the offering box back in the back on your way out. Now, by way of announcement, two quick things. First, be sure to be here 2 Sundays from today because in addition to our time of worship and Bible study, we're also going to be celebrating many of the wonderful things that God accomplished in and through our church this past year. Matt Regal, the chairman of our elders this past year, is going to be providing our annual State of the Church address in accordance with our church bylaws. It's also going to be a tremendous opportunity to look ahead at some of the awesome things that God has in store for us here in the new year. So again, that's going to be 2 Sundays from now, January 22nd. I promise you won't want to miss it. And speaking of things that you certainly won't want to miss, Pastor Ben and Pastor Jalen are putting together another FTW event, Fellowship, Training, and Worship. The one we had last fall was wildly successful. About 100 of you came out for a special night of worship and fellowship. I think the speaker, Zach Epps, did a wonderful job of laying the foundation for some really practical teaching and discipleship training focused on learning how to share your faith more effectively. So go ahead and mark your calendars now. The next FTW event is going to be right here Tuesday night, February the 7th, and I'm really looking forward to this special time of equipping the saints and reaching the lost and making disciples is what we're all about here at the Heights, which is also the impetus behind this new sermon series that we've launched last week. And if you missed it, then I want to encourage you just as quickly as possible to get online, get caught up. I think Pastor Ben did a fabulous job of kicking the new year off, setting the pace as we walk through this topical series called New Year, New Mercies. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about some of the habits and practices, the spiritual disciplines that help us to be followers of Jesus. So if you've got a Bible nearby, go ahead and open it up to 2 places today. We're actually going to be starting out in Matthew chapter 7 there on the New Testament side of your Bible. Then we're going to be spending some time at the end in Psalm 19 on the Old Testament side of your Bible. So Matthew 7, Psalm 19. And as you're making your way there to those starting spots, let me just ask, how many of you noticed the new podium or new lectern that we have here today? Some of you are saying, it's new? I didn't notice it at all. Let me tell you, there was nothing wrong with the old one. It served us faithfully for 21 years. But Pastor Ben and Pastor Jalen picked this one out. Let me just say, I got to tell you, I have never in all my years of ministry have I ever endorsed a product. But I'm telling you right now, I think this is one thing that I can totally stand behind. Oh, come on now. That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I think that was good. Listen, if you're new here to the Heights, then you're going to discover that my humor doesn't get any worse than that. But it certainly doesn't get any better either. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. It is what it is. With that said, maybe we should just quickly go to the Lord in prayer. Let's ask Him to bless our time of study here today. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this special moment in time. Lord, I thank you for the people who are joining us maybe for the very first time, maybe as part of their New Year's resolution. God, we thank you for your word, because we don't have to listen to the opinions of people, but we could see something that was written for our instruction, something that tells us who we are and whose we are and where we're going. Thank you for being the God who loves us so much that you gave us your word and you sent us your son. And even in the middle of uncertainty and crisis, you continue to be the God of Israel, the God of your church, and the God of all creation. So we honor you, Lord, and we look to you now in Jesus' name. And all together in unity, the church said, Amen. Amen. Well, I don't know about you, but I actually love the new year. I love reflecting back on the year that's passed and all the wins and the losses. And the question we should be asking right now is, God, who am I becoming? God, where am I headed? What's the trajectory of my life? Because there's a lot of things that you could be successful in, but the question is, what if you were successful in all the wrong things? You see, in the end, that would be the worst kind of failure there is. So the new year invites us to ask questions like, what have I learned? How have I grown? How has God brought self-awareness into some areas of my life? And here at the Heights, our mission is to make disciples. That word discipleship is going to be our primary focus this year. If you've never heard that word before, it simply means that we're going to look at Jesus. And together, we're going to explore how we can imitate his life. What did he teach? How did he live? How can we observe and obey his commands so that our lives could be totally rearranged around his teaching and his life? See, that's what it means to be a disciple. And here at this church, we believe that a relationship with Jesus changes everything, right? Not on the outside, but on the inside. So with the most important question we could ever ask, who am I becoming? Well, Jesus helps us to answer that question. One of my favorite parables in the Bible is the story of the house built on the rock. If you grew up in Sunday school, then you've heard this story before. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told a story about a wise man and about a foolish man. And the wise man built his house upon a rock, whereas the foolish man built his house on the sand. And most of the time we assume that the man who built his house on the sand, he probably did so maybe a lot faster or with a lot less effort. Regardless, Jesus says that a storm came and it totally devastated the house that was built on the sand. It just washed it away. All that work for nothing. Again, success at the wrong thing, right? But then he said the house that was built on the rock stood the test of time. So Jesus is inviting us to think about our lives and to examine how we're building our house. What's the trajectory of your life? Who are you becoming? And the difference between the wise man and the foolish man is going to be described here in Matthew chapter 7. Now together, we're just going to read one verse together, verse 24. Let's take a look at it. Matthew 7, verse 24. There Jesus said, "Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Now, did you catch the phrase there? You see, I kind of think that both men heard the word of God, but only one of them actually put these words into practice. And the question that I have for you here today is, are you putting the words of Jesus into practice in your own life? Listen, our habits, the things that we practice, they actually shape our future. When you sow a thought, you reap an action. When you sow an action, you reap a habit. When you sow a habit, you reap a character. And when you sow a character, you reap a destiny. How many of you have heard that before and know it to be true? Yeah. So that means that we need to be very thoughtful and wise about the habits that we're actually developing. Because here's our first big idea here today. Go ahead and write it down this way. Point number 1 there in your notes. Habits shape our lives. Good or bad, habits shape our lives. Habits aren't going to be making small differences in our life, like maybe some of your New Year's resolutions that here on day 8 you've already broken. No, these habits make all the difference in our life because for most of us, honestly, habits can actually be even unconscious. In fact, Duke University did a study that revealed that 40% of our actions every day are not products of our choices, but products of our habits. For example, how many of you have ever experienced that moment where you pull into your driveway after work and you stop and think you have no idea how you got there, right? You have no memory of any of the stoplights or experienced on the way, or turning right or turning left. All you remember is, well, maybe you were having a conversation on the phone, or you were deep in thought about something, and you just can't recall, how did I get here? What happened was your brain was on autopilot. God created it that way to conserve energy. So 40% of the things that you do every single day, you don't even think about. Like maybe when you wake up in the morning, several of you automatically, what do? You reach for your phone, don't you? Or maybe for you, maybe the first thing you think about when you wake up is getting a cup of coffee, right? Others of you, maybe you instinctively just get on your knees and pray. It's the very first thing that you do. So stop and think, what are your habits? And how are those habits shaping your life? The pandemic in recent years created some really good habits, as well as quite a few bad habits. Remember, we've all learned how to wear masks and learn how to social distance and learn how to have meetings over Zoom. Here in our own church, one of the things that we changed is how we take communion. No longer is there a pile of bread or pile of crackers there in the center of the communion trays, right? Through which every single one of you would dig your grubby paws and touch all the different pieces of bread, right? Looking back, when you think about it, it's actually pretty gross, right? Ranks right up there with drinking juice from the same communal cup like our Catholic and Lutheran friends used to do. So again, we have some really new good habits, but we've also developed some really bad habits. Far too many of us have binge watched some pretty awful shows on TV. Shows that leave you feeling dirty inside after you watch them. Some of you started drinking again, or using drugs to numb the pain and the isolation that you felt. And you found yourself maybe spending hours and hours and hours in front of a screen. Again, those habits, whether good or bad, they continue to shape our lives today. And listen, this place of developing habits really is the place where the enemy wars for our soul. John 10:10, Jesus said, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. But he says, I have come so that you may have life and have it to the full, so that you can have abundant life. Listen, that's his plan for your life. But he's also saying very clearly, as the good shepherd, that you and I, we do in fact have an enemy who wants to steal, kill, and destroy our lives. And we see this in the very beginning of the Bible. Clear back in Genesis chapter 1. Remember, God creates a world that is good. He creates a man and a woman, and he puts them in a garden. And he says, go, have fun, reproduce, do whatever you want with only one exception. Don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But then what happened? The enemy comes in with his plan to steal, kill, and destroy. Most of you know that story. Think about it. Notice that the serpent didn't bite Eve, did he? No, instead he just whispers in her ear, hey, you know that limitation that God put on you that you can't eat from the tree? Listen, you know you want to, right? So just follow your heart. Be true to yourself. The only reason that he doesn't want you to eat from that tree is because if you do, then you will be like him. Notice how the enemy whispers the same thing to you and me even today. Things that sound so good and so true. Hey, don't let some old book tell you how to live. Who is God anyway? Don't let him impose his will on you. Just follow your heart. Follow your own impulses. The problem is that just leads to chaos and destruction. We see it all around us in our world today. We don't realize that if we follow our hearts and if we follow our own impulses and just do whatever we want, that doesn't lead us to freedom at all. Instead, it just leads us to slavery. It doesn't lead to the abundant life. Instead, it leads us to depression and anxiety and hopelessness. But listen, the right habits and the right limits actually create freedom. You could write it down this way. Point number 2 there in your notes. Habits of grace shape our lives toward wisdom, freedom, and joy. Habits of grace. What are habits of grace? Well, it's just another way of saying spiritual disciplines. It's the hard work of developing the kind of habits that lead you toward freedom. I think we all know, we all understand the fact that you could walk away from an all-you-can-eat buffet After overindulging, eating way too much, how do you feel inside, right? Leaves you feeling sick and miserable. In the very same way, you can binge watch things on TV that leave you feeling the same way. But the right limits can give us wisdom and freedom and joy. The Apostle Paul talks about this in Romans 12:2. If you've been a Christian for any length of time at all, this verse is probably familiar to you. There he says, whatever you do, Paul says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let's stop and think about those two words, conformed and transformed. They both have the same root word, don't they? The root is the word formed. It's the idea that our heart is constantly being formed or shaped. And Paul's saying, don't let your heart be shaped. Don't let your habits be created by the pattern of this world. Why? Because it's not going to end well. That's why. Instead, he says, let your heart be transformed as you renew your mind, as you think about the things of God, and as you put the words of Jesus into practice. Again, the practices of the heart and mind, they shape the soul. Reading the Bible isn't just education, filling your mind with theological facts. No, reading the Bible actually shapes your heart and your soul to who God is. Why? Again, because he wants to have a relationship with you. This is the formation of the people of God. This formation is happening all the time based upon whatever we put in front of ourselves. Dallas Willard, who is a great thinker around the idea of Christian formation, in his book, Renovation of the Heart, he wrote this shocking statement. Listen, he said, both the terrorists and the saints have been shaped by spiritual formation. Wow, what makes somebody blow themselves up and kill other people? Well, it's because their hearts and their minds have been formed around a certain idea, the meetings that they go to, the books that they read, and the people that they listen to. Those things shape their whole lives in a trajectory that leads them to do some really horrific things. But you know what? The same process of forming your heart and mind can also make you a kinder person, and a wiser person, a more free and loving person. It all comes down to whatever you're shaping your soul with. That's why Paul is so passionate. Listen to what he says to the Galatian church. It really gives you an idea about how passionate he is about spiritual formation, the spiritual formation of God's people. In Galatians 4:19, he says, my dear children, I feel like I'm going through the labor pains of childbirth for you until Christ is formed in you. Now, I'll admit, it's a dangerous thing for any man to stand up and say, I know what it's like to feel labor pains, right? I'm told the closest thing might be that of a kidney stone. I have 4 kids and 4 grandchildren, but as a guy, I really have no clue. But Paul says, I feel like I'm in labor. He says, my body is in agony. I have so many hopes, so many dreams for the people of God that you would form your hearts and minds, you'd form your hearts and minds around the right things. Because those small little habits are shaping your life on a particular trajectory. In fact, if you're a parent who's watched your son or daughter shaping their lives around things that take them away from God, then you can totally relate. You know how it so grieves your heart because you know how it's going to end. But as a pastor of the people of God, Paul's saying, I so badly want God's word and God's spirit to shape your heart. And listen, as your pastor, when it comes to habits and spiritual disciplines, I have to make you aware of a certain reality. In fact, I'm going to ask you to write it down this way. Point number 3 there in your outline. Habits of grace, they take time. They take hard work to develop. Now, as soon as I say that, I realize that we don't always like the idea of hard work, right? Or the idea of time, having to do something every single day, day after day. But we see this idea of spiritual disciplines all throughout the Bible. To his young apprentice Timothy, Paul said, train yourself to be godly. But then he said, physical training, physical exercise, it has little value, but spiritual exercise will help you not just in this life, but in the life to come. In other words, working out spiritually gives you a glimpse of an abundant life right here on earth, but also an abundant life in heaven. So Christian, like it or not, you have to work out. Let me ask, how many of you been to the gym here in the new year? Maybe it was one of your New Year's resolutions. Not many hands are up. Let me ask it this way. How many of you know somebody named Jim? There you go. I'm in that club. That's more hands went up there, right? By the way, let me just tell you, somebody here gave my contact information, my name and contact information to the Genesis Health Club here in town. Let me tell you, I really want to thank you for that gift, right? They called me day and night trying to get me to come in. They didn't quite understand when I tried to tell them on the phone that physical training was of some value, but I'm exercising spiritually, right? They didn't buy it at all. Regardless, exercise of any kind, it's not easy to do. And as a Christian, maybe you're thinking, wait a minute, Steve, I thought this whole life with Jesus I thought it was about grace. I mean, we just sang songs about it. All right, we're saved by grace. It's the gift of God so that nobody could boast. There's no work to do. We're not saved by our works. And friend, I totally agree with that. But let me ask you a question. Are you saying that we just trust Jesus to save us and then we just sit back and chill till we get to heaven? No, that's a total misunderstanding of grace. In Philippians 2, Paul says that you are to continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it's God who works in you to will and act in order to fulfill his good purpose. In other words, if you're a Christian, Paul says, listen, you better be working out. You work out your salvation with fear and trembling. You work out because God's already done his work in you. Again, it's always because of God. So listen carefully. Grace is not opposed to effort. It's not. Grace is opposed to earning. Do you understand that? As the people of God, we need to be thoughtful about the disciplines that we're developing that help us to be ready for the moment. Because let me tell you, here's what's going to happen. In 2023, God is going to place an opportunity right in front of you. And you're either going to be ready for that moment or not based on how you understand and how you work out these spiritual disciplines. If you're not working out, if you're not developing these habits of grace, when that moment comes, you won't be ready. You won't be mature enough for the moment or self-aware enough for the moment or kind enough or generous enough to even be in that moment. But listen, if you train yourself to be godly, something is going to happen this year. It's going to be one of those aha kind of moments where you recognize that God has been preparing you for that moment right there. And listen, you won't miss it. You won't. I love the quote from John Steinbeck, who wasn't even a Christian himself. He said something so thought-provoking when it comes to a life of grace. Listen, he said, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. Aren't you glad that you don't have to be perfect? Aren't you glad that God doesn't expect you to be perfect? In fact, he knows that we're made out of dust and that we're weak and that we fail. Listen, once you've freed yourself from the idea that you have to work to earn God's favor, then that frees you up to work in a totally different kind of way. Now you're training rather than trying. You're training to grow strong rather than trying to win God's favor. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul would say this about grace, the grace of God. He said, by the grace of God, I am what I am. By his grace in me was not without an effect. And because of that grace, I worked harder than all the other apostles. Why? Because it was the grace of God working in me. Do you see the connection there? He's developing the habits. He's developing the disciplines that will enable him to live the type of life, to be the type of leader of God's people, because he takes seriously the call of God on his life. German theologian Helmut Thielich put it this way. He said, the Christian stands not under the dictatorship of a legalistic you ought, but in the magnetic field of Christian freedom under the empowerment of the you may. God invites us to grow in him. His grace saves you. His grace redeems you. His grace justifies you and sanctifies you. His grace also gives you the power to say yes or no to the things that are placed in front of you. But again, it's not a legalism or a moralism. It's not like having more spiritual disciplines makes you any better than those who are around you or makes God love you more. Please keep in mind that the Bible is not primarily a book about how to do good and how to avoid bad. I mean, if you read the Bible that way, then you're just going to totally miss the point. You see, the Bible is primarily about a relationship that God wants to have with you. A relationship where God says, no, you're not strong enough. You're not smart enough. You can't ever be perfect. And your sin has separated you from me. But God says, I sent my only son, my one and only son, to die on the cross so that we could be back in relationship with each other and so that you could experience the abundant life, both here and in the life to come. Aren't you grateful for a God who loves us like that? So as the people of God here in 2023, part of our goal is how do we form habits? How do we resist certain things, and how do we embrace other things? As Paul talked to his young apprentice Titus, he said, the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. It gives us the power to say no to ungodliness and live a life of righteous and live a righteous and pure life in this unrighteous generation. So yes, you're right. Grace saves you. But it also gives you the power to resist the temptations and the thought processes that Satan throws your way. Things like, hey, if you just go inside her apartment for just a few minutes, nothing bad's going to happen. Or, hey, if you take that drink or smoke that joint, click on that site, you know it'll feel so good. Besides, God wants you to be happy, right? Satan's lies always sound so good. But spiritual disciplines, habits of grace, allow us to resist that pull toward the things that are so toxic for our soul. So habits help us to resist, but habits also help us to embrace. Every single week here at the Heights, we talk about our mission and our desire to make disciples. How do we do that here? Easily. We try to do that by connecting people to God, by connecting people with other people, and by connecting people to worship, to outreach. Now, it's not just some slogan that's easy to remember. It's actually a biblical paradigm that leads to healthy habits. Like, how do I connect to God? Through the reading of his word, and through worshiping him with his people, and taking communion, becoming more generous with my finances. Listen carefully. I'm just going to tell you, a new habit that the Christian church is going to have to develop sooner rather than later. Listen, it's coming back to church, being in the presence of God's people, sharing in communion. There's just something powerful about worshiping with the people of God. That's not to say that technology is bad if you're watching online. It was a lifeline during the pandemic. All I'm saying is that far too many of us have just developed the bad habit of staying away. At some point, you've got to recreate the habit of coming back and joining with God's people. Because there's something so powerful about the gathering of God's people. It's a habit that we could sometimes get out of. Just like the habit of connecting with other people around a table, in a home, in a small group, having conversations, doing life together. How do I develop the habit of always being generous to other people, to share my faith and to serve people? And then once you get into the habit of serving every week or giving every week or sharing your faith every week, before you know it, all of a sudden it just becomes a pattern or a rhythm in your life. All of these are habits that we want to embrace as a church together, which is why we're taking time to talk about them in this topical series that we've kicked off here in the new year. But, and this is important, listen to this, but if you could only pick one habit in your life, if you could only form one spiritual discipline, if there could only be one, this is the one that I would give to you. And I think it is the most transformational habit or spiritual discipline that you could ever develop in your entire life. This one will guide you and shape you for the rest of your life. Are you ready for it? Here it is. Read God's word every day. That's it. In fact, I'm going to ask you to write it down that way. Fourth and finally, there in your notes, the most important habit you could develop in life is to read God's word every day. Now, why do I say that? Well, because the statistics around Christians, people who claim to be born again, they've been pretty consistent over the past 4 decades. A third of Americans claim to be born again. However, when you look at their behavior, when you look at the behavior of those people, the level of divorce, the level of the use and abuse of drugs and alcohol and pornography, they consistently remain at almost the exact same level as those people who say they aren't born again, which leaves you scratching your head, does it not? Oh, wait a minute. See, there's thousands, even millions of people who say, I believe in Jesus, I've been saved by his grace, and he's shaping my life. Yes, I agree, but their behavior doesn't change at all. And Jesus says, no, no, no. If you're my disciple, if you're wise, then you'll take my words and you'll do what? You will put them into practice. But as they look deeper into that research, of the 1/3 who say that they're born again, those who read their Bible every day, listen, the level of divorce in their families, the level of drug and alcohol abuse, as well as the level of generosity and prayer and service, they begin to change dramatically. Because something happens when you read God's word. As you read it, as you learn it, and as you learn to love it, it totally shapes your life. We see these incredible lines in the Bible, like Psalm 1, that says, "Blessed is the man who meditates on God's word. He'll be like a tree planted by living water, so that no matter what happens in life, whether famine or dryness, he's always going to bear fruit." In the same way, God said to Joshua, "Joshua, here's my law. Meditate on it day and night. It's going to shape your life. You're going to be blessed. You're going to find success as you let the habit of God's word shape your heart and your mind." Now, I realize some of you are looking at me and you're saying, "Steve, I don't even know where to start, man." Well, let me give you a simple line. It's not there in your notes, but it might be the greatest takeaway that we have here today. Listen carefully. The best way to learn to read the Bible for yourself is to read the Bible for yourself. I know, right? It's pretty profound. I'm going to say it again so that you won't forget it. The best way to learn to read the Bible for yourself is to read the Bible for yourself. Now listen, that doesn't necessarily mean by yourself. It means for yourself. If you want to obey the commands of Jesus, if God's inviting you to know his word and to read his word and to let his word shape your heart and your mind, then listen, you're going to have to read the Bible for yourself. You're going to have to develop that habit. Let me give you a little tip that's been so helpful in my own life. Before you read, just take a moment and pray. God, please help me to understand even just one thing from what I read here today and apply it to my life. Lord, let it shape my life. It's a pretty simple prayer. But it's amazing what will happen if you ask God to reveal himself to you through his word and ask the Holy Spirit to teach you. And then as you grow in the habits of grace, you'll learn more and more about the Bible until you don't just learn the Bible, but you love the Bible. Because again, the Bible's not about how many verses you can memorize. It's about how it shapes your heart. Now, let me ask, how long do you think it takes to actually read the whole Bible? Anybody know? It's 70 hours. If you do the math, that's just 15 minutes a day. You can read the entire Bible in a year, 70 hours. For some of you, that's just shutting off Netflix or social media for like a couple of weeks. Let me ask, what would happen if you read the entire Bible this year? Let me encourage you to do it with somebody else, maybe an accountability partner or in a small group. But if you've never done it before, I don't recommend just picking it up and trying to read it cover to cover. What'll happen? I mean, you'll get through Genesis because it's pretty exciting enough in and of itself, right? In the Exodus, it'll be pretty cool because we spent most of last year walking through it together, so it'll be familiar for you. But then you get to like Leviticus and Numbers, right? I see by the nods that I can hear the giggles. That's where most of you drop off, right? So maybe start in the Gospel of Mark. Start someplace so you can understand it and grow in it and ask questions. That's how you grow in God's grace. Or maybe you're here today and you're thinking just the opposite. Come on now, Steve, I've been reading the Bible for 20, 30, 40 years. This is just so elementary to me. Well, listen, here's what I would say to you. If that's the case, then bring somebody along with you. Because wherever you are, there's somebody in front of you and somebody behind you. There's somebody right next to you, to your right or your left. Somebody who may not know how to read the Bible, or they're so intimidated by its words. They need a spiritual mother or father to help them walk through it together. Got a dear friend right here in our church who every day after he reads, he shoots a text of his devotion to a group of his friends. Why? So that they can have a dialogue via text about what they're learning and how they're growing. Again, this is the habit of grace. This is the spiritual discipline that'll shape your life more than any other. If you're here with us last week, Pastor Ben taught us that God's mercies are brand new every single morning. You might remember he did the math and told us that he had experienced God's new mercies on 11,868 mornings. Now here today, he's experienced 7 more since then, right? I became a Christian back in March of 1974, March 24th to be exact, so I ran the calculations myself. Just since the day that I gave my life to the Lord, I have had 17,822 days. But listen, I will confess to you today that my deepest regret in life is that I didn't spend more of those days with my Bible open, asking God to shape my life. I'll also tell you that I haven't always obeyed the Bible. There have been moments in my life where I've failed. Yes, moments in my life where I've made progress, but then I've fallen back. Moments where I've gotten lazy even and apathetic. Even the times where the Bible just seems so dry. But the daily habit of reading God's word has shaped me and formed my life into a totally different person, being conformed into the image of Jesus. And the good news is he's not done with me. He's got work to do. God has promised that he who began a good work in me will take it to completion on the day of Christ Jesus. And listen, the same thing is true for you. So I'm going to challenge you here today to read the Bible every single day and pray for wisdom. Now, before we close, I want to do something a little different. I just want to invite you into my time in the Bible. I want to invite you into just a short time of reflection on a fairly simple passage that I've read every single day this past week. It's Psalm 19. If you've got your Bible handy, go ahead and open it up to Psalm 19 so we can walk through it together. As we do, I'm just going to let you eavesdrop on a conversation between me and God through his word. Remember, the Bible calls itself a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. It also calls itself a mirror to our soul and a sword that divides the thoughts and the attitudes of our heart. What did Moses say about these words? He says, these are not just idle words. He said, these words are your very life. They're God-breathed for instruction and training, for rebuking and correcting, and for living a life that's righteous. So together, we're just going to spend the next few moments just meditating on God's word together. I know as soon as I say that word meditating, some of you might be triggered to think that this is some kind of a New Age, Eastern kind of meditation. So let me explain. There's a big difference between New Age or Eastern meditation and Christian meditation. New Age meditation is all about you emptying your mind and just letting whatever thoughts come your way. Christian meditation calls us to fill our mind with God's word and let it shape and form us. So do you see the difference? Okay, so Psalm 19. It's a psalm of David. It's a psalm where he starts out talking about how God speaks through and reveals himself through creation, but also how he can, how you can get to know him in a personal way through his word. So let's read it together. Let's start just in verse 7 of Psalm 19. Psalm 19, verse 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. Now, if I just stop right there and meditate on this verse, I think, man, the law of the Lord is perfect. My soul longs for perfection. And this world is just so imperfect. If there's one place that I could find it, man, I want to spend time there. Yeah, my soul needs reviving. My soul needs refreshing. So God, please revive me. Refresh me. 2022 had so many challenges and difficulties. God, please give me a hope and a fresh confidence in what you're doing. Your statutes are trustworthy, Lord. I'm so looking for someone or something that I can trust. There's no fake news in your word. And your word makes me wise because honestly, many times I just think so simply. So God, please, I need your wisdom. Verse 8, the precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. God, I'm so tired of injustice and corruption and evil seeming to win all the time. It just saps my energy, discourages me, robs my joy. God, please fill my heart with joy. Help me to find something to smile at today. Lord, reveal yourself in that way. Your commands are radiant. They give light to my eyes. God, I need light for my eyes. Distraction is the enemy of renewal, and I'm so distracted by so many different things. Lord, I need you to renew me. Please give light to my eyes, Father. Help me to see through your light. Verse 9, the fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are sure and altogether righteous. God, I know there's only one person I should fear, and that's you. I know that if I fear you, I won't fear anything else. God, I want to be a man who doesn't fear anyone or anything else except you, because you are worthy of that awe and that respect. Father, I thank you that your decrees and ordinances are sure and firm, and they're right. Please shape my heart by your decrees and by your laws, by your commands, by your statutes, Father. Make me to be more like you. Verse 10, they are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They're sweeter than honey from the comb. By them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. God, please warn me when I'm off track. Help me to find sweetness in your word. Help me to find an abundant life, this great reward that you offer to those who honor you with their lives. Verse 12, but who can discern his errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then will I be blameless, innocent of great transgression. God, please, help me to not do something stupid. Help me not to be involved with something that I'm unaware of. You say that many times I can't even know myself and that I have hidden sins. So reveal them by your word that's a mirror to my soul. Reveal them in the community of people around me who have the courage to tell me the truth, because I want to walk in a way that's blameless. God, please show me my blind spots. Verse 14, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Now, what was that? 5 minutes? Maybe not even. 5 minutes of reading God's word. Not just to get what it said, but listening to God say, Steve, does your soul need to be revived? Steve, are there any hidden sins in your life that nobody else can see? Are there willful sins that you're playing with and toying with that you need to confess so that I can kill them? That's what God says, so that you could live this abundant life. Steve, is my word sweet like honey to you? Because I've given you these instructions not just for right now, but I want us to be close for all of eternity. Church, I'm asking you, can you hear the heart of God in that? God wants to speak to you through his word. He wants to have a relationship with you and to reveal his love and his goodness to you. But I got to tell you, if you're not reading this book, all you're doing is looking at your phone, then you're just going to feel empty inside. You're always going to be a slave to sin. You will have neglected the most important habit that gives you the opportunity to develop in your life. But listen, if you do develop this habit, before you know it, you'll find yourself with so much more peace and more wisdom and more grace and more joy. And I pray that as we go on this journey together as a church, I pray that we'll trust in God's amazing grace to guide us. Amen? Let's close in prayer together. Father God, thank you again for your good grace. We love you, and we ask that you would form in us just the desire to read your word, Father. The desire to ask questions of people who know the Bible better than we do. We pray that we'd grow in your grace to be men and women who delight in your word and meditate on it day and night, because we know that it will mold us and shape our lives in truly profound ways. Lord, I pray for anyone within the sound of my voice who doesn't yet know your amazing grace. Please, Lord, draw them to salvation right now. Or for those who've drifted away from you, Lord, please draw them back and closer to your presence than ever before. We trust you for it now in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thanks again for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like more information about our church, or if you just want to share what God's been doing in your life, drop us a line. Give us a call. Again, may God bless you.